Welcome back to The Manual, podcast where we talk about the stuff most men's podcasts are too afraid to touch. Today's episode is going to be wild, raw, and real. Buckle up. What is up, y'all? What is going on? Welcome back to The Manual podcast. I'm Nick. He's Joe.
Quit playing with your dinghy.
Just kidding. I was thinking we should probably change the intro music. I don't know if this would be an issue. We get in trouble if we tried to do this, but the song, I always think it's from Pitch Perfect, but it was an actual song. I'm talking about sex, baby. I'm talking about you and me.
I'm talking about all the good things and the bad things that may be.
Do you remember you and I were at Mass once in St. Paul? I think it was at Nativity in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I think I was there with my wife and you were by yourself because you were yet a single man. And we got done with Mass and this little old lady in front of us turned around and was like, "You have a beautiful singing voice." And I immediately thought he was talking about my wife, but she was talking about you. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do.
I remember it was definitely Nativity. Yeah, I remember that.
You have deep, it's probably not a bass. You got a deep baritone voice and you project that voice while singing.
I go hard. Yeah, I've heard if you got a good voice, let God hear it. If you don't, let him know about it. So just anything worth doing is worth overdoing.
Yeah. Well, you sing out. There's also a great story. I wasn't there for that, but you got a great story about going into parts of the liturgy music that you weren't supposed to attend to, leading the people.
It was a faux pas. Saying hallelujah in the middle of Lent. Everyone was so scandalized. Story for another time.
So funny. Well, speaking of play,
you
can have a little fun in life. Today, we are talking about the chapter from Sam Jolman's book, The Sex Talk You Never Got, where he focuses on play, sex as play. And I'm excited about this because this kind of is the chapter that started this all. You had bought this book. I forget what your introduction to the book or initial awareness of the book was, but you bought the book, started reading it, and got to this chapter and texted me and were like, "Dude, you got to read this." His conversation around sex and play is dynamite. So I'd love to just start there. What struck you so much? What created that level of resonance that when you got here, it kind of stopped you in your tracks and left you with the sense that, this is super important. We're not talking enough about this. This really matters. And is something that I think we all need to focus on and understand more about. What was that for you when you first read it?
Probably multiple things. One, I mean, coincident. Interestingly enough, I read it around the same time Teresa and I were having this conversation around engaging our children in play, where it's never urgent. But I was struck of the importance of it as he's talking about play, and we'll define play and the dynamics at play today in this conversation, and just really convicted to the power of slowing down, and entering in with your whole person into the moment. Children are such a gift on so many levels. I think Dostoevsky says the soul is healed by being with children. And I think this is one of the things, like we're taken back. We're forced to slow down on many practical levels with our children. But one of the ways is they enter into play and they regularly ask, "Dad, can you play?" And there's always this resistance to it because of the urgency of life's demands. But really, I really did feel the Holy Spirit like just double down and confirming in convicting me of this need to enter into the world of play. And then with regards to sex, I mean, I certainly relate to what he's talking about with regards to sex. Isn't just about the genitals. Like, the sex talk is not just about male and female anatomy parts. You have sex, he says, with the whole person. The whole person participates. Yes, body, but heart, mind, and soul. That's the goal, certainly. And as we talked about last week with regards to, I think we talked about hookup culture in the context of purity culture, but hookup culture, like, the number one rule I think is, like, don't feel
Mhm.
something, like, don't like, really. And so you're being vulnerable with this stranger, but you're not being vulnerable at all. And so the invitation for sex as play and play is to enter in fully, and it really is vulnerable. I was talking with a priest yesterday about this, how there's a school attached to his parish, and the kids had this Nerf war, and he talked about how initially there's this resistance. It's like this resistance to get out on the, I got a wedding tomorrow, on the dance floor at a wedding, just to let yourself free and fully enter in to the playground, to the moment, to get lost, because it's really vulnerable.
Mhm.
To play with children isn't as vulnerable, but to just play as adults and to enter in can be a really vulnerable experience, because it's not just a body experience. Same with sex. I mean, the true full expression of the sexual experience is you're 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 lost in the moment. There's a playfulness to it. So there's so many. I'm just like hitting on a lot of different things here. There's so many things he speaks to, and we'll get to some of them in this conversation, where the playfulness of the sexual act for play, right? Even foreplay starts uh in the day with a little nice caress and butt squeeze right around the kitchen sink, and communicating there's like this warming up playfulness, even though the language that you use to each other. And then when you start entering into it, it's like game on, and it's fun. It's this deep connection, and the connection he makes between actual play and deep play, and this transcendent experience of play. And I think one word he uses is this effervescence, which is this description of of what happens when ultimately anybody, even like in a stadium of fans that are lost in this moment of witnessing this experience and getting, like, participating in this sport, have their, like, heartbeats align, their breaths align, their central nervous system starts lining up when you play together. And it's, yeah, so many dynamics at play, pardon the pun, that just really get me fired up to slow down, because the most important things are hardly ever urgent. And play is really important. And sex as play, and to understand what that means, super important for a life of deep intimacy and deep play
Yeah.
with your best friend.
Yeah. No, what you just said there at the end reminded later in the chapter, he talks about uh, the nervous system state of being kind of in between sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Yes.
That is so important to cultivate in life in general, but is essential
Yes.
to a healthy sex life in its ideal, that there's this arousal,
Yeah.
which is sympathetic, but then safety and rest.
Right.
And this excitement and this locked inness that you're talking about, combined
Right.
with this deep peace and the ability to not be on guard, that
Mm,
again requires cultivation over a lifetime. If you wanna have this as an adult in
yeah.
relationship with another adult in this intimate way, you don't just like, "Okay, well, now let's start doing that." You're like, if your nervous system hasn't learned how to navigate and live in that in between, you're gonna struggle to experience that in the context of sex. And it's not that you can never experience that, but that so often I think many of the issues that arise in sexual relationships certainly have to do with what you said earlier about the playfulness outside of the sexual element of relationship. Say, if there's a lot of conflict, if one person is harming the other person in mentally, emotionally, etc., that dynamic can certainly add to it. But also too, if someone comes into the relationship with really no idea how to live in that in between, how to get to rest, how to experience arousal, how to play in realms of their life, to your point of like cultivating play in children, is in part this ability to cultivate their awe and wonder compass, their ability to experience
Mm,
fear and that exhilaration at the same time, right? To be in awe with the power and the magnitude and the significance of the experience, but to be safe enough to not run from it, right? What we talked about last week. And so
yeah.
there's so much here. To be able to set the stage for the rest of this conversation, I wonder if you could define play for us as Sam does in this chapter.
Well, what I want to do here is quote on page 59. He quotes Diane Ackerman. She wrote a book, and I have a bad habit of every time I hear about a book, I add it to my Amazon cart to save for later. The book is called Deep Play. Love the title. This because just man, we don't you want to just suck out the marrow of life, to quote Thoreau, just to be and enter in deeply, deep connection to myself, to God, to creation, to reality. So deep play. Here's what she says, and she's talking about play, not sex, but here both. So she says, deep play arises in such moments of intense enjoyment, focus, control, creativity, timelessness, confidence, volition, lack of self awareness. And here the word transcendence. You're like outside of you, this transcendent experience while doing things intrinsically worthwhile, rewarding for their own sake. And that's huge, not for the sake of something else. I utilize this in order to do something else. I'm working out in order to get healthy. I'm doing this for that, but it's for its own sake. Following certain rules, it's important. Don't we all hate the rule breaker? They may include the rule of gravity and balance, just natural law. There's natural rules at play, and then rules of how we play this game on a limited playing field. She says deep play requires one's full attention. I love that. We say in our system that attention is at the heart of devotion. That and to being devoted to anyone, to your spouse, to your God, just to your children, to be devoted to them. Attention. Deep play requires one's full attention. It feels cleansing because when acting and thinking become one, there's no room left for other thoughts. So good. Life's usual choices in relationships are suspended. The past never happened and the future won't arise. One is suspended between tick and tock. Joe, as I'm reading that, what parts stand out to you? It's a pretty rich paragraph there. What stands out to you?
Yeah, the element of rules, I think of sport
Hmm,
and game, and, Sam says later in the chapter, "Nothing can get a whole stadium of people aligned towards a
right.
single purpose than a bad call."
Yep.
Like, there's nothing that gets us as fired up as the injustice of something in that context, that transcendent context of being all into it to foul play.
Yeah.
Uh and so I think that's really important to pull out. I also then think about what you and I were talking about just before we hopped on here when you were talking about this really important idea of transcendence and what porn offers to us
Hmm.
as a counterfeit experience. So often in coaching groups, especially when we're talking about fantasy, why do we look for these things? What
Right.
stories are playing out here? I oftentimes think of Jay Stringer's book Unwanted, where he says that about 90 studies have shown about 90% of the time you're viewing pornography, you're looking at the face of the actor or actress in that scene,
Yeah, it's wild.
and what is that face communicating? Intense engagement, presence, desire, fulfillment, longing, excitement, fun, like these are all the
Mhm.
things that are going on there that are
Mhm.
that I am getting it, into my mirror neurons, that as it comes into my sensory perception is going and then
Yeah,
creating that like in kind experience. And so often I bring it up because I think it's super important for us to reflect on that. Where else in life do you experience that kind of intense engagement?
totally.
Where and not just like the theory of it, but that you're in a setting where the person that you are making eye contact with is expressing that kind of rich connection, that kind of excitement, that kind of wow, that kind of all in experience, right?
Mhm.
And so that you can experience it and that the 2 of you can share that together. And I think for most of us, the answer is few and far between, if any,
Right. Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
experience that kind of engagement. So
Yeah.
I have this sort of opened portal for so many of us began when we were very young to get that in a manufactured, artificial, fake way, but that really does create those mirror neuron connections for me that feels like real connection
Totally.
of play with another. And it
Yeah.
is fake, but if you don't have that in real life, you
Yep.
have to get it somewhere else, right?
Yep.
It I
Yep.
I do think in some ways it is kind of a I don't wanna say it's a natural law, but it's a natural impetus for us to go looking for that kind of intense engagement in life, that kind of transcendence, that kind of enwrapping experience. And so for so many of us, we've not, going back to the first chapter, experienced the formation
Mhm.
of that transcendent play in all areas of our life. So many areas of life become arduous and sort of just the mundane routine. I mean, think of
Yeah.
work. You know, how many of us experience that in the dynamic of work where you're engaged in something and getting that transcending experience? We were talking about flow state before we
Yep.
hopped on here, where you are
Yep.
in it and locked in and experience both the adrenaline rush of getting through something, of working
Yep.
to the end of something, but also the presence of,
Yeah.
it is good that I'm here, that I'm not working so that I can make $1,000,000 2 years from now as the only objective, that I'm doing this for its own sake, because
Yeah.
what I'm doing is good, right? And it's good that I'm here
Yeah.
in this present moment.
Yeah. So it is so much good stuff you're saying there. We've said many times, listeners, if you've heard us talk before, one of our favorite definitions for addiction is any illegitimate act trying to fill a legitimate need, habituated over time without the ability to stop on your own. Okay, so this is really important. There's illegitimate ways to fill legitimate needs, uh, and then there's legitimate ways to fill legitimate needs. We would propose to you that play is a legitimate need. Okay, so there's in getting free, there's two. There's the positive and then there's the negative approach. Not good and bad, but negative meaning put the blocks up, avoid these environments, don't go there, know your triggers, avoid those things, don't do that. But then there's the positive. There's the filling your cup, the making sure you're connecting with others, with yourself, with God, taking care of your body, your mind, your soul, your heart, your spirit, and with regards to there's a few things I want to highlight that you're talking about. I want to distinguish between flow and hyper focus. So flow is a beautiful transcendent like experience that will happen when true play is experienced and true sex as play is experienced. This deep connection with another. You're out of yourself. You're lost in the moment. You're almost transported to this other realm, and it is. In everyone listening to this, I guarantee you've experienced that. It could even be by like cleaning your room, and you feel like locked in. You're doing one thing at a time, and time seems to slow down, like you're suspended, as Diane Ackerman said, between tick and tock. Porn, as Joe just said, is is a counterfeit. So you're escaping, you're getting lost in this space, but it's not. It's not this flow state, it's this hyper focused. So we've all experienced this edging for hours where I'm just locked in and I'm actually not free. I'm trapped in it. And so it's over and over. And uh, and Joe, I want to tease out a couple of the things I'm saying here if you could. And so there's like legitimate ways to fill the legitimate need. And as adults, there could be a lot of different things. It could be fishing, could be hiking, could be playing a sport, could be playing ultimate frisbee. It could be playing a board game. I don't know, whatever your thing is. I'd propose that video games they're designed to hijack your brainstem and you get into hyper focus. So that probably wouldn't be it. But the importance of getting into this state of yeah, being lost. And last thing, I think I've already said it, but I just want to double down on what you're saying. I've been really talking to a lot of my clients lately about how porn is trying to fill something within you, and it gives you this escape. It's giving you a lot of things, but regarding the fantasy world, as we're talking about now, you're lost. You're leaving your current reality. And it's an escape. Play does that as well. It helps you leave your current reality, and time seems to be suspended. But it's in a wholly connected, deep way that fills your soul, fills your body, gets you connected with yourself, with others, with creation, with like the cosmic reality. So I don't know if I'm adding anything more to Joe to what you're saying, but I don't know if there's anything to tease out there. But I just want to kind of double down on a couple things that you were saying there.
Yeah, I think it's so important for us in order to be able to understand which we tend towards or which we're in and what we have the capacity to experience in life to pay close attention to develop awareness around our experience. Right? And so the image that I kept coming to mind as you're describing this flow state experience is the dancer who's light on their feet. There's this sort
Mm,
of like floating experience, this effortless experience to them exerting something that required much of themselves, right?
yeah,
That there's this ease and this lightness and this grace to the experience. I
yeah,
think that one of the important and I think this might even be a rule of unhealthy hyper focus is that the the purpose, intent, motivation of doing it or being in it is to get through it so that I can be okay again.
yeah,
Right? It's this preoccupation with
yep,
this obstacle will
yep,
make me unwell until I fix it,
yep.
which then creates really going back to that sort of in between neurocognitive state,
Hmm.
which is flow, the balance between arousal and peace and rest.
Yeah, yeah,
It's hyper focus is the absence of that peace or rest, that
yeah,
parasympathetic capacity with this locked in tunnel
yeah.
vision drive to
That's
I
right.
need to go here in order to get back to being okay, right?
Hmm.
Which is fundamentally, foundationally the development of a pornography addiction in our belief is that is when I am unwell, I experience an intense preoccupation and craving to get this thing because I am better off after than I was when I started.
Hmm.
That it gets me back to being okay. And certainly it doesn't. The aftermath of that, oftentimes I feel worse and then I'm more checked out and more out of it than I was before. But if you don't have any other way to allow yourself to experience that sort of transcendence, to get yourself back to the point where you can be in flow, you'll need something like this in order to be able to get you back to that state of being okay. And so I think that distinction is super important and really, really good here. I want to talk briefly about rules. You touched on it. Certainly the quote that you shared touched on it. But maybe you can speak a bit about the role of rules, the purpose that they serve. Sam does a great job. He talks about the rule of uh, modern culture or philosophy around sex is the only rule is consent. hookup culture, the only rule fueled by alcohol is don't feel it.
Mm,
And then purity culture is a boatload of rules, largely summing up to don't do it
right.
and feel awful if you do. Which certainly, in his estimation, and I think is absolutely true, has formed a generation of people who don't know how to experience the awe, the wonder, the desire, the play of healthy sexual, uh, integrated life. So if you could talk a little bit about rules, put a little bit more flesh on that, that'd be great.
Sure. I'll skip around just a little bit. Pages 72 and 73, listeners. If you didn't get the book yet, check it out. The Sex Talk You Never Got by Sam Jolman, Reclaiming the Heart of Masculine Sexuality. We're going through this book study. On pages 72 and 73, I just want to highlight a few things he says. He says, we've lost the set of rules. And you mentioned it. Purity culture was the church's attempt at expressing a set of rules. Uh, and you could say it missed the forest for the trees. It became about the rules, right? He says it failed miserably. And we talked about this last week, as discussed last week. The rules largely shut down sexual desire and offered no meaningful sexual education or sexual blessing. He says, recently, a client in the beginning of a dating relationship said, purity culture gave me so many rules that I'm lost. I don't know how to navigate. And then he says the rules drowned out his own intuition and killed the play of romance. He goes on, he says, in play, the entire point of rules is to enhance the glory of the game, right? The point of rules is so that we can really enjoy it, enjoy the experience of the game, and allow the greatest thriving of its players. We could hold each such rule against two questions. Does it protect and support the players? And does the game go better with such rules in place? Hookup culture offers a negative answer to both questions, and so does purity culture. And then he goes on, he says, God's goal with every human, as expressed in the Bible, is that we would not come to need stated rules anymore. Isn't that what we all want? Just what are the rules? Tell me what to do, because then it doesn't become as vulnerable. I'm talking about sex now. And certainly, I mean, it's wild, this cognitive dissonance. If you're a Christian, you're like, okay, I'm not supposed to do anything until we get married. I have all these boundaries, all these rules, all these guardrails. And then I get married, and talk about a need to rewire your brain. Because it sounds like pretty much anything goes as long as I climax inside of her. Right? I mean, and anything that can all be abused, certainly, right? There's certainly uh some ways to honor the dignity of the person, right? Um Rather, so God doesn't want us to have any rules, right? Rather, He wants the rules, quote, written on our hearts. Okay, He wants it to be about our heart. He wants to take us into desire. At one point in the New Testament, a religious leader came to Jesus, asked him for the most important command from God, to which Jesus answered, "Love God and love others." Others. That's the summary of the whole book, the whole rule book. In other words, love is the rule. Everything must be done in love. Sex was made to be driven by love. So I want to stop there. And
Do
there
you
is
do you have the
go ahead.
2 questions? I think it's right after that in the chapter, he asks 2 questions that sort of operate as guardrails. Uh,
Yeah, because he let's see here. What is the most loving way to have sex? Should be the question we ask ourselves and our partner. The path of love may feel clear as mud at times, but that's where you must learn to walk with God. Um, I don't know where the other question is. Uh, but what
okay.
is the most loving way to have sex?
Yeah, and I think, again, without the proper formation outside of the sexual domain, where one fosters awe and wonder for all of creation and experiences this kind of play, this joined state interplay between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and less we learn to cultivate that? Because I think, I mean, the obvious answer is that much of the behavioral stuff that purity culture communicates is kind of true. The
Mhm.
goal is not to get as close to the line as possible
Right.
without crossing it.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong question.
Right. So it how do I behave in a non-sexual romantic relationship ahead of a marriage really in many ways looks the same way that purity culture communicated it. How
Yep.
you should behave, what are the
Right.
questions you should be asking, what boundaries should you put in place.
Right.
I don't think those were necessarily the problem, but they missed the point of, well, then if sexuality is not going to be a domain that's going to be active in our life, how do we cultivate or form one another in this early relationship in a way that will create overflow when sex becomes a dimension of our relationship, right? What do I mean by that? Well,
Yeah.
how are we together experiencing awe and wonder in creation before we start having sex? How are how
Hmm.
how are we experiencing together that confluence of sympathetic and parasympathetic activation being enwrapped in something? And then I think of the 50s and 60s when like so much of like dance culture like people meeting each other at the dance hall down the street of that,
Yeah.
like there was this sort of play and dance that was occurring that would connect people together. Well, what are they
Mm.
experiencing? Well, they're going to the place that you go to experience this kind of in between state,
Hmm.
right? That they are experiencing the
Yeah.
whole the non-sexual, if you will, version of this kind of play together, right? And
Yeah.
they're dancing together long before that they're dancing in their sexual domain together, if that makes sense. Both in the
Totally.
example I'm giving, both in reality, like they're
Right.
actually dancing,
Right.
but that seems to become the way. That again,
Hmm.
that how so what is the answer or solution to purity culture? Well, it's not so much. Again, like Jolman talks about, it's not so much, well, you need better formation about boundaries and disciplines and routines and the ways that you should operate when it comes to sex, but it's that we need deep formation and to experience deep formation when you get into a romantic relationship around play together, non-sexual play together. Because if
Mhm.
you can do that excellently,
Yeah.
I think that's the proposal. If you can learn
Yeah.
to play well in life
That's really
in a
good.
transcendent way that respects the rules, and you experience that regularly, you are setting yourself up to experience the playing field, the environment, the adventure of sexual play in in a beautiful, dramatic way exactly as God intended. And so I think it transforms from the "don't do it" to, "Well, what else am I supposed to do?" If
Mhm.
we spend all of our time together trying not to do it, well, what should we be doing with our time together, right? And I think that becomes the way. Go experience
Yeah.
non-sexual play that brings transcendence, that brings that kind of fulfillment, that brings that kind of enrapture, that kind of longing and desire that both arouses and rests the senses, that gets you excited and energized and locked in, but creates the experience of safety with one another. And if you can do that 1,000 times before the day you commit your life together and begin a sexual relationship together, that sexual relationship, the flow into that sexual relationship will have been modeled so well that it'll feel like getting it into it as flow state instead of like
That's so
what
good.
do we do now? Like part A goes into part B and like the mechanicalness, which there is always some of that at the beginning of a sexual relationship, especially if two people are experiencing sex for the first time. But even that becomes a kind of play.
Yeah.
in and of itself. The adventure of starting, trying something new, right?
Mhm.
Unwrapping the box of a game you've never played before and trying to figure
Mhm.
out the rules. Well, you gotta read the instruction manual.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
You gotta ask ChatGPT for the quick 2-minute primer of how to do this right, right? And so I think all of that, like, so what is the way? What's the proposal we're making here is that a integral part, and I think this goes back beautifully with what you were saying again about learning or being parents who form your children well in the art of play. It
Mhm.
starts early on as non-sexual play, having nothing to do with sex, but learning to be able to get yourself in that state that's so, reflexive and second nature to a child, and then
Yep.
learning as they grow to begin to form themselves in that, because early on children don't have any rules, right? Kid A steals block from kid B, and then kid B punches kid A and takes block back, right? So like as I learn and grow and understand the rules of play, I mean, watching where my daughter is at, a 9-year-old, and how she talks about playing on the playground with her classmates is very different from how things were happening when she was 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
Far less conflict in that sort of petty sense of, "I don't understand how to not steal from people the things that I want and take it for myself," and far more art and fantasy and story, the games they're playing and coming up with and the rules they create in the, like, there's more complexity, right? And that's supposed to continue on in life
Yeah.
to, again, what we're talking about here is one of the most complex, story-laden, intimate, vulnerable, contexts for play to be expressed that we have as human beings. And that's the genius of the sort of "don't do it yet," is you're not ready. You're not ready, and if you start now as a
Yeah.
15-year-old, as even maybe a 20-year-old, before you're ready to fully commit yourself to the weight of the responsibility, you
That's
haven't
so
learned
good.
yet how to play well, right?
Yeah.
So the way becomes, and again, I'm a little beating a dead horse or repeating myself here, but I think it bears repeating. The way becomes learn how to play well in the non-sexual domains of life. Because if you can do that, your ability to learn to play well with another. I loved what he talked about environment and setting the scene and
Yep.
like the court matters kind of like if you're playing on a
Yep.
crappy court, it feels different than playing in an NBA arena, right?
Right.
And he talks about the Song of Songs and in different places in scriptures where people are making love out in the wilderness and not in a way that would get them exposed or seen by others. It's always this sort of secret activity that
Yep.
only the two of them are sharing, but they're out there, you know?
Yeah.
They are in the wild,
Yeah.
experiencing all that this has, with one another. He uses the example of, friends of his who had a camper van and an apartment. They had a little apartment where their 2 kids, they would always go to the camper van to go have sex,
Yeah.
because the apartment felt like a uncomfortable, "Oh, we gotta be quiet," like, "Don't make any noise, just get it o," kind of this "just get it over with" mentality because it feels cramped, and so they created their own ecosystem, this place away where they could experience one another and fully enter into it without the, "Oh, is kid A waking up?" Like, all these other competing demands or priority, and that's, again, another intentional, thoughtful practice
Yeah.
element of play. It's like the difference between going to dance at a dance hall where they play crappy music over crappy speakers that have fuzz in the background. It's like you can't get into the experience and the richness of dance. You can't lose yourself in the dance if all that's going on. Too distracting.
Yeah.
But if you go to a big band hall where there's a 30-piece band and they're all technically extremely proficient at what they do and they're doing the dance, they're drawing you into it and that's that natural overflow. So how do you learn how to do that in the sexual area? Well, so much of this is the cultivation of it in the non-sexual domain, and that
Yep.
takes time, which is the wisdom of wait, you're not ready yet, but also requires the intentional formation of it in your own life.
So good.
All right, let's land the plane here.
That's great.
Uh, I think the question, and you can add to this, Nick, if you want. I think the question that comes to mind for me, for our listeners to be thinking about is, in your life now, how often and in what ways do you experience this play? If you're in a sexual marriage relationship, in that relationship, are you experiencing that in your sexual relationship? And maybe more importantly, in non-sexual domains of your life, where do you experience that kind of transcendent or in the words of that quote from earlier, deep play? Where do you
Hmm.
experience that in your life? And try to take the past month as a snapshot and write out, spend 20 minutes reflecting. Where in this past month have I experienced the transcendent nature of deep play? And get really specific. Journal about that. Put it down on paper to be able to describe what it felt like to be in it. And I don't know if there's a recommendation here to make, like how often you should be experiencing this, but I think it's safe to say that in the way that God set up humans to work, it's probably too long if we don't experience that in work and in leisure on a weekly basis,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah. I just want to give one more word just to the sex side of things. He says no, first he talks about play and then sex. So nothing kills true play more than making it an obligation, a necessity, something essential to life and death. And then he says this: nothing kills the play mood. Now we're talking about sex more than making it a means to an end. Psychologist and author David Schnark says, we don't realize that seeing sex as a quote drive, sex drive, we don't realize that seeing sex as a drive makes us focus on relieving sexual tensions rather than wanting our partner. That is so freaking good. I'm going to say it again. We don't realize that seeing sex as a drive makes us focus on relieving sexual tensions rather than wanting our partner. Whatever leads us to sex, we must always embrace the desire nature of it. We want it. We don't need it. We must create an environment of desire. That's the most inviting thing we can offer ourselves and our partner. Need demands, desire, invites. And this is just getting us into our heart. We got to be really careful when we talk about, I forget what they call it, like the marital, like, right or whatever, where a woman must always submit to the man's
Yeah.
desire. Like, whoa, we got to be really careful there. And yeah, this sexual drive language can lead us to think, well, I have a need, and it needs to, as you've said many times, sex is not a legitimate need. Intimacy, communion is. And so desire invites, needs demand. Let's enter into that heart and want our spouse and play in that world and invite and not just look for release um, uh, or relief, but restoration and connection that
Yeah.
play and ultimately sex and communion gives us.
That's so good. Y'all, awesome to be with you. A few quick notes for things that are coming up or happening here in the Freedom Group. We have another group that's going to launch either this month or next month. So, want to make you aware of that. If porn is playing a role in your life, we'd love to help you deal with that once and for all. You can go to thefreedomgroup.co to learn more about how to schedule a discovery with the call with us, where we want to talk with you about what this has looked like in your life and how we might be able to help. We also have an awesome opportunity coming up in June, towards the end of June. One of our coaches on our team spent like half of his life in the wilderness, and he's taking guys out to the wilderness. So, a topic with our conversation last week on awe, and certainly here as well on play. And so want you to encourage you to check out the Outbound. You can go to our website, thefreedomgroup.co/outbound, or you can just go to our main website and find a tab from there to learn more. Fill out an application. Chris will talk with you directly about the practical details before you commit to going on. It's a small group. Only 5 guys will be going out. So want to make you aware of that. Otherwise, we're grateful for you. We love you. Keep living and learning how to play deeply. Peace.